Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Ange Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my bold predictions for the 2021 NFL and fantasy football season. On today's episode, of course, I'm going to be making predictions as to which team is going to win this upcoming season Super Bowl, who's going to be the NFL MVP, or perhaps even in the fantasy football landscape, who outside of the top 12 ADP of their current position has the highest likelihood of being a respective RB1, wide receiver 1, QB1 this upcoming season, and who my biggest sleeper is for this upcoming fantasy football season. We'll talk about all of these different categories on today's bold prediction episode. But before we begin, I want to thank you guys for the incredible support. Again, you guys continue to come out daily and support the channel, whether it is with your viewership, commenting down below, clicking that like button. I can't emphasize enough how much that helps. I cannot thank you guys enough. Now, of course, the journey continues as we approach the 2021 fantasy football season and week 1 beginning tomorrow. Again, do not forget, click that subscribe button. We're making fantasy football content for the entirety of the season. For those of you who have yet to subscribe to the channel, we're beginning tomorrow with our week 1 running back rankings, and then every subsequent day we'll talk about our wide receivers, tight end, quarterback rankings up until Thursday Night Football, the kickoff to the 2021 season. But this content doesn't stop there. Of course, we'll have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I'm going to try to put out content every single day of the season for all 18 weeks. So subscribe to the channel, because this is the place that is going to help you win a 2021 fantasy football championship this season. Thank you very much in advance. All right, the last thing I wanted to mention, again, for those of you who are looking for my fantasy football draft guide, it's in the description of the video. If you need to go ahead and get some rankings prior to your draft, it's there for those of you who are interested in picking that up. All right, let's start talking about my 2021 bold predictions, because I have done this for the last, 2-3 seasons. And yes, there are some predictions that I make that hit, and then there are also some that absolutely whiff. But I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to give you guys my thought process on a couple of the predictions via the regular NFL season. And then we'll go ahead and we'll talk about the fantasy football season ahead of us. Beginning with who I believe is going to win the Super Bowl this upcoming season. You know, this upcoming Super Bowl is at SoFi Stadium. You know, I'm considering going. Just depends who's going to be in it. Of course, as it currently stands, when I look at both divisions, the AFC and the NFC, there's a lot of, stacked talent at the top, whether it's the AFC with Patrick Mahomes, of course, and the Kansas City Chiefs, along with the Cleveland Browns, who are certainly going to compete this year, the Buffalo Bills. I think those are the 3 strongest teams, unless, in fact, Baltimore wants to get their stuff together in the playoffs. Outside of that, when we look at the NFC, of course, we have the Green Bay Packers, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the defending champions. We have teams like the Los Angeles Rams, perhaps even the 49ers, who could be, returning to prominence this upcoming season based on all the injuries they had last year, obviously set them back. But when I look at the entire NFL landscape, the thing that continues to just catch my eye and the thing that I'm continuing to grab onto is the idea that I believe that the Green Bay Packers are going to be able to win the NFL championship, the Super Bowl, this upcoming season. Yes, this is a prediction that maybe some others will have. I just don't think a lot of people are predicting anyone to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but I know they're beatable. I know for a fact that the Green Bay Packers had a very good opportunity in doing so. Again, Tom Brady threw 3 interceptions, was giving them the game, but they couldn't capitalize on it. I think this upcoming season, Aaron Rodgers, this is his last dance. He's going to make it real hard for Green Bay to let him go after winning a championship, after having a MVP season in 2020. I think this is the year that the Green Bay Packers get it done. Although their roster isn't the most supreme on paper and isn't the team that we're all looking at thinking how can anyone stop them, I think it's a team that when they get going and when they get into the playoffs, they're going to be hard to stop. The Green Bay Packers are my prediction there. And let's go ahead and move on to another prediction I have, the NFL MVP this year. You may be wondering, okay, Andrew, who do you think the NFL MVP is going to be this year? Last year, I thought it was going to be Dak Prescott, okay? Just all transparency. I also thought that the Kansas City Chiefs were going to win the Super Bowl last year. Obviously, Kansas City Chiefs weren't able to do it because a lot of teams cannot two-peat, specifically why I went ahead with the Green Bay Packers instead of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But in terms of the NFL MVP, typically it's a quarterback. And unless, you're going to have an incredible season as a running back and go for 3,000 yards, they're never going to give it to you. Even though I do believe Derrick Henry probably should have won MVP last year, 8th player in all-time history to go for 2,000 rushing yards. Regardless, the quarterback position dominates this. And when I look across the landscape, I think to myself, the last couple MVPs, of course, Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, and Patrick Mahomes, they've all been able to get it done at an extremely high level. But this upcoming season, the thumbnail, Kyler Murray is going to be my prediction. I think that the pieces that they've surrounded Kyler Murray with, whether it is offensive line or wide receiver and even improving the backfield to an extent, at least getting a little bit more talent there, and bolstering up that defense is going to make the biggest difference. I don't expect this team to be the best in the entire NFC. I don't even expect them to be the best team in their respective division. They might not even win as many games as the Los Angeles Rams, but I think Kyler Murray is going to will his team potentially into the playoffs this upcoming year, and I think he's going to win the NFL MVP. And if not the NFL MVP, at least be the fantasy football MVP this year. As a guy that is going as the number 3 overall quarterback in terms of his current ADP, I think he could finish as the number 1 overall guy. Just as long as he continues to improve year over year as he has in his career thus far, I think the sky's the limit. He continues to raise the bar, and I think as long as he can stay healthy throughout the 17-game season, this man can very easily be the fantasy football and or NFL MVP. That is my prediction there. Now, when we talk about the rushing title, in years past, I've tried to be cute with this. I've talked about last year specifically who the thumbnail was. It was Nick Chubb. I thought Nick Chubb last year was going to win the rushing title. Unfortunately, he missed 4 weeks last year, specifically 5 games, of course, because he left early in that Dallas Cowboys game. But ultimately, Nick Chubb wasn't able to accomplish it. It was Derrick Henry. And I think to myself, well, Derrick Henry is really an unstoppable force, and there really isn't anyone else in my mind that could truly take this title from him unless Derrick Henry is going to miss a significant amount of time, which I don't see happening, and I definitely don't expect, because he really hasn't had the injury history in his past. He's built like a different human being. He's quite honestly an alien to an extent. But either way, I think Derrick Henry wins the rushing title once again this year. Of course, Dalvin Cook was the only other running back last year that was even moderately close to him, which was at 1,500 yards. Otherwise, I think there was only 8 total running backs last year that surpassed 1,000 rushing yards. There weren't a lot of guys that were able to compete at this level. So hopefully this year we might end up seeing more guys get into that upper echelon, into the 12, 13, 1,500 yard rushing marks. But ultimately, Derrick Henry, he holds this as his own and is going to continue to be King Henry for a reason. The last player that I wanted to predict on the NFL basis in terms of who I think is going to be potentially the comeback player of the year. There's a lot of potential guys that I can throw out there. Specifically, the popular answer would be, Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott was on a MVP-like run last year prior to his ankle injury. But even though I think Dak Prescott will be good, I think the biggest storyline in my eyes, maybe it's because of my fantasy football bias, is whether or not Saquon Barkley, Saquon Barkley is going to be capable of picking up where he left off. I think Saquon Barkley, in my opinion, is going to be the comeback player of the year. I believe that even though he doesn't start off the season on fire, the devastating injury that he sustained in 2020 and all of the rehab and the recovery that he's had to process through this offseason is going to pay off, and he is going to be named the comeback player of the year. That is my prediction there this upcoming season. Okay, now that we've gone over our NFL predictions, let's go ahead and let's start talking about fantasy football predictions. I'll go ahead and I'll tell you guys who I predicted last year in these specific slots to give you some perspective as to how off or on I was in these specific predictions. Okay, here we go. Just so we all understand exactly what I'm predicting at this current moment in time. I'm going to be predicting players who are currently outside of the top 12 running back, wide receiver, quarterback, and tight end ADP, who have the greatest possibility of not only finishing as a top 12 member, but in my opinion, is going to potentially do it this upcoming season. So we'll go ahead and predict 1 or 2 players at each position, giving you guys some perspective. Now, last year at the running back position, I unfortunately made the decision of predicting that Melvin Gordon and Mark Ingram would end up finishing as RB1s. Unfortunately, neither of them did. Melvin Gordon in a half PPR was the number 13 overall back, or number 14 in a full PPR, and we all know what happened to Mark Ingram. But, it is what it is. Let's go ahead and let's potentially predict what I expect to see in 2021. Of all the running backs who are currently outside of the top 12 ADP, there are guys like Joe Mixon, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Josh Jacobs, James Robinson, players that have been in the top 12 just recently. But at this current moment in time, I want to talk about a player that, yes, recently has been in the top 12 running back conversation, but as of late has been hamstrung by injuries and has potentially been pulled down in terms of his overall potential to be a top 12 running back, a guy that is going to see a lot of touches this upcoming season. I predict that Chris Carson, out of all running backs that are currently outside of the top 12 ADP, to finish as an RB1. That is my bold prediction at the running back position. Very interesting one. Yes, I understand, but I really do think that the Seattle Seahawks, regardless of their strength of schedule, are going to be running the ball heavily and getting this man involved in the passing game in which he's going to succeed. Now, when we move on to the wide receiver position, my predictions for last year were DK Metcalf and A.J. Brown. Obviously, both of them panned out. A.J. Brown was the number 15 in 2019, and then DK Metcalf was way lower than that. But I expected both these wide receivers to take that next step. And when I look at the landscape and I look at the statistics that back the reasoning as to why I predicted DK Metcalf and A.J. Brown to have that success in 2020, the only wide receiver that in my eyes continue to grab my attention and a guy that at this current moment in time is being relatively undervalued is a low-end wide receiver too, who could very easily become a wide receiver one, a guy that I haven't really mentioned that often this offseason. I know I've been, banging the drum for Deontay Johnson, Brandon Ayuk, but I honestly do believe that if anybody is going to, from outside of this top 12 category, break into it, that is an unexpected player, it would be DJ Moore of the Carolina Panthers. And yes, that is probably an unpopular opinion, but when I look at what he's capable of, having back-to-back seasons of 1,000 receiving yards, having himself, only 66, 67 receptions last year, but still being able to accomplish the 1,000 receiving yard mark, get himself a handful of touchdowns. I think Sam Darnold, what he has shown this offseason in terms of his improvements at the quarterback position and his comfort within this offense, especially with DJ Moore, of course, Robbie Anderson on the other side of the field, he's got comfort targets to send the ball to. This team is going to be passing for a majority of the games. They get Christian McCaffrey back, which is obviously going to open up their offense and get them down into the red zone, giving players like DJ more opportunity. I think, again, playing in the NFC South against those cornerbacks and safeties, it is one of the easier ones. They're typically shootouts. I think of all the wide receivers, DJ Moore has the greatest opportunity that in year 4, he can take that next step and become a fantastic wide receiver option for us. Now, the next quarterback that I want to mention, and specifically the quarterback that I mentioned last season, who could potentially make the top 12, was Daniel Jones. My gosh, did I make a mistake. But this upcoming year, a lot of people may be thinking, Andrew, name the rookies, name Trey Lance, name Justin Fields. I want to go ahead and give you some context as to why I'm not going to be naming either of those rookie quarterbacks this offseason as my potential quarterbacks that can make the top 12, because I do think there's going to be a rookie quarterback to make the top 12, but I don't think it's going to be Trey Lance or Justin Fields, because based on the history of the National Football League, unless a quarterback is playing 15 or more games as a starter of that team, they're typically not going to get into that top 12 echelon. So when I look at Trey Lance and I look at Justin Fields, specifically, I want to know when they're going to be starting. Let's look at their schedules. Let's see when exactly the team is going to potentially be like, you know what, we have to replace Jimmy Garoppolo or Andy Dalton and put in the backup quarterback to give him an opportunity. Now, in the case of Trey Lance, they play against Detroit Lions. Obviously, it's going to be a victory. Jimmy Garoppolo will start 1-0. Play against Philadelphia. They'll also win that 2-0. Then they get the Green Bay Packers, Seattle Seahawks, Arizona Cardinals, and Indianapolis Colts. I think by week 6, once week 6 is done, and they get into the bye week in week 7, there may be a quarterback change. So expect, if you do have Trey Lance, that is going to be the moment where the switch happens. So you'll get potentially upwards of 11 games with Trey Lance as the starting quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers this upcoming regular season, and that's when he'll go ahead and take over. But, the schedule is going to be fairly easy for him in the back end, and I think that's where they're going to switch. Unfortunately, that is not going to allow Trey Lance to get into that top 12 category, but after he takes the starting position by the midway point of the regular season, we could end up seeing him elevate himself in that category on a weekly basis. Now, in terms of the case of Justin Fields, they play against the Los Angeles Rams week 1, Sunday Night Football. I expect, the Chicago Bears not to have a good game there. Is that going to prompt a replacement? I don't think that's going to be the case, because I think this coaching staff wants to give Andy Dalton the chance to play against the Cincinnati Bengals in week 2. Because the Bears play against the Bengals. We know how much the Bengals really did screw over Andy Dalton a couple years back when, in fact, he said, hey, I want to be traded. And they went ahead and they held on to his rights. They didn't give him the release that he requested, all of this kind of drama. But either way, I think they want him to at least have the opportunity at the revenge game. So if Justin Fields is going to take the job, it would potentially be after week 2, week 3, maybe starting in the reps where they play against, and this is specifically in week 4, Detroit, Las Vegas, Green Bay. That is a good spot to pretty much get Justin Fields acclimated to the offense, because once they have to play against Tampa Bay, San Francisco, Pittsburgh, and Baltimore, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. So we'll see how that goes. But with that all said, with those rookie quarterbacks mentioned, the actual quarterbacks that I anticipate to make potential top 12 pushes this year is Trevor Lawrence and Kirk Cousins. Now, Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion, he's going to be in negative game scripts all season long. I don't think this Jacksonville Jaguars defense is going to be able to stop a soul, which in fact will give them the opportunity to throw the ball the entire time. And I think this offense is built to do so. Even though the offensive line isn't the greatest, I think that the wide receiver options that they have surrounded Trevor Lawrence with, whether it is Marvin Jones, DJ Chark, and of course my favorite Laviska Shenault, and then you have James Robinson out of this backfield, I do believe they have enough talent. Maybe James O'Shaughnessy at the tight end position. I know it's a very underutilized name, but he doesn't really get that much work there. I think that they can eventually get to a position in which, of course, Trevor Lawrence is throwing the ball 60% of the time in comparison to this team running the ball maybe 40% of the time, which Darrell Bevell offenses typically end up doing. So Trevor Lawrence is my prediction there. Now, I talk about Kirk Cousins, and though he is not a sexy prediction, you got to understand, Kirk Cousins last year was still a fantastic quarterback option. The guy in a 4-point per passing touchdown league was a consistent fantasy quarterback on a weekly basis. He had 12 games of 2 or more touchdowns, and outside of Aaron Rodgers, no other quarterback threw as many 3+ passing touchdown games last season. So again, Kirk Cousins in this offense, having thrown 35 touchdowns, getting more of a rapport with Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, continuing to build this offense. And to be honest, they weren't that great last year on defense. I don't expect them to be great this year. I think they themselves will be in a lot of negative game scripts, which of course is going to force them to throw the ball. I expect the offense to be identical to last year because it is Clint Kubiak, the son of Gary Kubiak, who's the former offensive coordinator. So it should be a very seamless transition. And I think Kirk Cousins is another one of these quarterbacks that if in fact you guys are playing in a 2 QB league, I think Trevor Lawrence, Kirk Cousins as my second quarterback there, as my super flex option in a 2 QB league is not a bad option at all as your quarterback too, if you want to go ahead and wait and not overinvest in another one of those top 10 potential prospects. Because again, every year, regardless of what our rankings are, there's always going to be players that get hurt and drop out of that top 12. We don't know who that's going to be or who's going to fall victim to the Grim Reaper, but regardless, I think these two quarterbacks are great options. Next position on the board is the tight end position. We talk about the tight end position a lot, but the thing that I've done in years past is predicted, okay, of the group of tight ends that are currently outside of the top 12 ADP, who has the greatest chance of being a top 6 tight end? Because again, being a top 12 tight end doesn't give you value. Being the number 10 doesn't mean you're going to even average 10 fantasy points per week. You're never going to get there. In fact, last year, the number 3 overall tight end in a half PPR scoring format, Robert Tonyan, only had 150 fantasy points. So he wasn't even producing enough fantasy points throughout the entire season. But in my opinion, going into this season, in terms of players that are outside of the top 12 range of this tight end ADP, I think that Jonnu Smith has the greatest potential upside of being a top potential 6 overall tight end this upcoming season. The switch to Mac Jones give me that much more confidence. I think this offense, based on the history of the New England Patriots offense, we of course have seen them use 2 tight end sets, whether it was with Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez, and they found a lot of success with Gronk. In 2020, they went ahead and they drafted 2 rookie tight ends. Neither of them panned out. And going into 2021, they had a lot of cap space and they had a lot of potential. So they went and they picked up Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, and they want to potentially re-implement this double tight end set, give them the ability to have extra blockers on the field instead of wide receivers, and continue to get this offense in the right direction. I think Jonnu Smith, between him and Hunter Henry, is the far more talented one. He's a guy that could even take reps out of the backfield and take rushing attempts. He is that athletic. And what he has shown in years past, of course, with Mike Vrabel over there in Tennessee, of course, with Arthur Smith kind of making him a focal point of that Tennessee Titans offense, I think he can come over with Mac Jones and be a huge security blanket and a guy that could very easily score a lot of touchdowns this year in the New England Patriots offense. So there's Jonnu Smith for me. The last player and the last fantasy prediction that I want to make this year is the biggest sleeper. Now, this isn't going to be a rookie. This isn't going to be a guy that you're drafting in the 12th round, because those guys, they fall apart every year. You can predict that Henry Ruggs or Jerry Jeudy will play well, but they just end up not doing so in their rookie seasons because there is a lot of circumstance to get into that. But the player that I think a lot of people are skipping out on, that I haven't even talked a lot about this offseason, who in my opinion is the biggest sleeper going into the 2021 season. To put it in perspective, my biggest sleeper from 2 years past was Jarvis Landry. He finishes the number 13 overall wide receiver. Last year, it was Keenan Allen. He obviously was an unstoppable force prior to his injury. This upcoming season, I'm keeping with my general tactic, and I'm picking another slot wide receiver. I'm picking Cooper Kupp as my biggest sleeper of the 2021 season. I think if you can leave your draft with Cooper Kupp as your wide receiver 2, potentially even wide receiver 3, you will be in a significantly more advantageous position than in years past. I know he had a very bad 2020 year, but the improvement at quarterback and the potential upside that he is going to see this year is going to make the worlds of difference. And we're going to see the 2019 Cooper Kupp and even 2018 Cooper Kupp return to us in a big form. That's my prediction this year, and these are my 2021 bold predictions of the NFL and fantasy football season. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Make sure you click that like button if you like today's video, and of course, do not forget to subscribe. I cannot emphasize it enough. We are starting with running back rankings tomorrow and getting you ready for week 1 of the 2021 fantasy football season so you can win your matchups and lead you to a 2021 fantasy football championship. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and until tomorrow, where of course we'll be talking about running backs during your beautiful Labor Day Monday, I'll see you guys. Peace.